Okay. I'm extremely sorry about these huge lapses that keep happening between classes. And at one time, I used to think it was mind over matter. But nowadays, I think it's matter over mind. However much I try to say, come what may, I'll go ahead, it doesn't happen. And basically, even now, I'm in pain, but I decided as long as it is not challenging the threshold of the pain, I'll sit and take a class. So that's the way it is as of now. All right, so we'll get going with what we were supposed to do. If you remember, we were talking about linguistics, and I told you that I'm breaking the chronology here and going on to linguistics because one of the most important problems that we have in research, especially historical research, is the problem of language. Okay, and I was basically arguing that the problem of language is one that almost becomes insurmountable in certain instances. And unless we know the history of why certain words have gone missing for some time, or why certain words have come back into the vocabulary of a particular language, unless we understand that process, we won't have an understanding of why really things do happen, and we'll make stupid errors like state and government in ancient India. I have repeated this often enough, so I'll just go through it very quickly. There was no state in ancient India. There was no state anywhere in the world in the ancient period. The state is a modern institution, and this modern institution is something that came into being because of certain peculiar necessities. So when we talk about the state, we have to talk about the state as something that came up in the modern period, and that too for a specific reason. And what is the specific reason? The specific reason is the meltdown of feudalism. By that, what we mean is not people like Bezos or people like Musk. They continue to remain rich while others are getting poorer. So some people say the poor are feeding the rich right now as things stand in the 21st century. This is not the kind of paradoxical situation we are seeing when the state is born. What we are seeing is essentially uh, the dying down of feudalism due to its inability to generate social wealth anymore. And this dying down of feudalism impoverished even the lords. Impoverished is something that has to be understood in a context here. It doesn't mean that they were impoverished as in they had no more money at all. That's not the idea. The idea is that they had a certain amount of money, that money got halved or probably became a quarter of the wealth that it was once. So, what we need to remember here is that everything has a history. This is the point that I was trying to make. And this I'm going to use as a segue to go into method and methodology. So everything has a history. And until and unless we have a firm grip over that history, we will not be in a position to anything constructive, anything closer to the truth, and uh, we will be arbitrary. We will be doing things which are arbitrary, and that is something that we cannot afford to do. So I said I'll segue into methodology. We were talking about resolutive compositive method in the University of Padua until my wonderful student Varun came, and I don't know, I can't use the expression that I would like to use. He the whole thing. So that's not the point. The point that you need to understand is resolutive compositive method was not used for the first time by Hobbes. Maybe as an abstract method it was used, but even then, even as an abstraction, it was not used by Hobbes, it was used by Machiavelli. But let's go back to resolutive compositive method. And let's just quickly remind ourselves of what it is that we were doing in the resolutive compositive method. I told you that the resolutive compositive method came up against one Christian belief, which was that if you didn't create something, then you wouldn't understand it. And this belief was used in the case of, sorry, it was used in the case of the universe. And the Christians constantly said that you cannot understand the universe because you did not create the universe yourself. And what you didn't create, you cannot understand. It was the wisdom of God which created the universe. And that particular wisdom of God, which people talk about as creationism. I've been on over creationism several times already, so I'm not going to go into it again now. So It came up as creationism, which is the opposite of Darwinism and evolution of life forms on Earth, as opposed to Darwin's evolution of life forms. You have this theory of creationism, which is the world was created with man as man, not man uh, evolving out of the great apes. Uh, and it, it'll say the fish are fish, the elephants are elephants. Whereas Darwinism would say that, life originated in water, after it originated in water, there was this thing called Kaya, one particular creature, which is the link between the amphibious life forms and life forms that remained in water. So you have the Kaya, and from the Kaya, you say that, there's a branching out of life that moved out of water onto the earth, and some kinds of life forms remain in water. So now this is what Darwinism says, and creationism opposes it. For example, let's take the case of a giraffe. Darwinism says that the giraffe didn't always have the neck which was so long as it is today because it needed to browse and not graze. It was browsing from the trees over the years as it kept trying to reach higher and higher levels of the trees. It evolved into this being with long front legs and a very long neck. And the proof of this being an evolution is shown as, the number of bones in the vertebral column in the neck of a giraffe is exactly the same as the number of bones in the vertebral column of a human being. Okay, so that is how you uphold the theory of, uh, you know, uh, evolutionism. And you also will say that the felines, the large cats, especially the lions and tigers, they developed a binocular vision, which not all other animals have perfectly. They have a perfectly good binocular vision, which somehow is even better than the human being's binocular vision. All right. And we seem to think that we are somehow the most intelligent form of life on earth, which we are not. According to Chomsky, I had posted this article with some of your people, an interview with Chomsky, where Chomsky says artificial intelligence that we are talking about today is not something which is really such a great thing. He says we have artificial intelligence already, which does extremely fast work For example, a simple calculator. A calculator in a matter of seconds produces an answer to an input, which the human mind might take a very long time. So we think this is somehow this artificial intelligence thing is superior to natural intelligence. But Chomsky's own examples, I'll give you. Has anyone read that interview? Nobody, right? Yeah, that's it.
No.
Yeah, please read it if you still have access to it.
Okay.
Uh,
Is that same video, Professor, that you share the interview?
it's not a video. It is a. It's got Chomsky looking like some wild
Uh-huh.
teacher, and it's actually an interview with a newspaper. I think it's with the Wall Street Journal or with the New York Times. The New York Times, perhaps. Uh, I had shared that with you. Just have a look at it. An interview with Noam Chomsky on artificial intelligence. That's what it says. And Chomsky argues that even today, there are so many questions about nature that we don't really know, can't really answer. Now, if any of you has been an ardent reader of Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock Holmes is somebody who believes that the bigger the brain, the greater the intellectual capacity. But in contrast to that, well, it was not, uh, what's his name? Who was I talking about? Sherlock Holmes. But it was Arthur Conan Doyle who believed in that and articulated it through the voice of Sherlock Holmes. Now, you take the case of ants. The ant itself is such a small little thing. And how big do you think is the brain of an ant? It's not going to be very big. But yet, that small brain of an ant, it does different kinds of things that even a bigger brained animal cannot do. Like animals, the ants are very good at sniffing out food. They're very good at collecting in cold places. They have a of sophisticated system of communication without a sound, at least sound that we can't hear. And he says, what is this if it isn't a mystery still? So, similarly, if you take the case of birds, especially the migrating birds or migratory birds, if you like, they travel thousands of kilometers and they land exactly where they land every year. Now, India is home to a lot of migratory birds. Uh, Birds that come to Kaziranga, birds that come to Bihar and Jharkhand especially, Hazaribagh. You have migratory pelicans. You have similar birds coming to Andhra Pradesh, the Kolleru Lake. So how do they navigate? Okay, they are starting off somewhere in regions like Siberia. And how are they able to precisely navigate and land at exactly the same places year after year? How do they navigate? Do we have any idea? We don't. We only have a conjecture. The conjecture that we have is that birds navigate using magnetic fields. And nobody has been able to prove that magnetic fields exist and that these magnetic fields are the ones which are used by birds for navigation. It hasn't been proved. So, as far as we are concerned, we are still we are still backward. We don't know if Darwinism is the answer to how things have happened. We don't know if creationism is there because, on the one level, if you say a giraffe grew its neck, do you find a short necked giraffe now? You don't. But we say that we evolved from great apes, and the great apes are all around us. And if you go to Africa, okay, you have the bonobos, you have the chimpanzees, you have the gorillas, the great silverback gorilla, which competes with me for size. Uh, so you have all these animals, and if we evolved out of them, then why have some of them stayed back in that original condition? Why have some evolved out of that and become Homo, various Homo species, and finally ended up as Homo sapiens? In India, you had Homo erectus. In Europe, you had a Homo neanderthalensis. I forget what was the name of the species in Africa, uh, simply due to disuse of information. And so, what are we saying? Are we saying the right thing? Are we probably going to be saying the right thing when we say that artificial intelligence is the next step in intelligence? Machine learning, which mercifully Chomsky points out to be a very, very lousy phrase. He says, what is this machine learning? Okay. He says it is learning through machines, not machine learning. You're not learning a machine. You're learning how to use a machine and get a certain kind of result from that. Okay. So if if you are looking at those kind of things, then machine learning and all these, he says, are not necessarily steps forward. Suddenly you create a hype around a certain kind of a thing, and you say, here it is the next big thing that is happening in the lives of human beings. And what is it? It's artificial intelligence, where it doesn't have all the equipment that we have up here. Does a calculator have the equipment that we have here? Computers, early languages of computers were written in human being like conversations. Okay, the coding was done in such a way that it was a human being like language interface. How are you? When will this happen? That's the kind of question you ask the computer and it gives you some reply. That's a stupid example. Please don't take it literally. Okay. But with, this is when you had languages like Fortran 4, COBOL, uh, when you had all these languages, this is how the protocol was. But the linguistic protocols changed completely with the emergence of the C language and C++ and Visual C++, which completely avoided the number of long questions that you would ask of a computer and it would give you an answer in return in your own language. It isn't like that anymore. So we already have artificial intelligence, which is in the form of Alexa, which is in the form of Siri, which is in the form of Google Companion. So they are all answering your questions. So you mean to say this is not artificial intelligence? It is artificial intelligence. But at the level of problem solving, how much of it has it actually helped beyond making life a little convenient here and there? So Chomsky is actually talking about Chat GPT, and he's saying that there is nothing wonderful here. The precursors of these things are all already there. Precursors of Chat GPT and all those, they are already there. So he says it's the human community which decides that something is wonderful and takes up research about that. So this becomes science. Now, can you actually dissect the mind or the brain of an ant? You can't. Can you actually ever crack the way in which birds navigate? Apparently, you don't. You won't. So, we create something for ourselves. We go on researching into it till we make it better and faster and smaller. And then we say, yeah, this is artificial intelligence. And see how it has progressed. Now, artificial intelligence is seen as progress, which, according to people like Chomsky, I'm quoting Chomsky because he is the most well known figure amongst all others who have spoken about and, in some instances, against this whole idea that artificial intelligence is somehow representative of the next step in intelligence. So, if you look at it that way, then it is very, very clear uh, that, you know, research as such does not necessarily produce the results that we don't want. It doesn't produce results that we don't want. For example, What kind of research would you do to crack how the birds fly a similar path year after year and reach a certain destination? How do they do that? How can an elephant communicate with infrasound over 20 kilometers? Infrasound, something that you and I cannot hear. Okay? It's low decibel sound. It's less than 20 cycles per minute. So elephants are able to clearly do that. And we have understood that elephants are able to do that. But how are they able to do that? You say memory of an elephant, which is absolutely right. The memory of an elephant is simply fantastic. Year after year, the migratory patterns of elephants in different parts of the world during different seasons is in itself a marvel. It is really a marvel. They make their way hundreds of kilometers and reach watering holes to drink water. And today, what is happening, especially in countries like India, is that we, the human species, are building things in the elephant pathway, unlike us who have to lay down roads. And nowadays, even laying down roads is not enough. Previously, we used to ask somebody, I need to go to this place, how do I go? That fellow will say, go turn right, then turn left, and then right, and then you don't know where you're going. So now Google has this wonderful maps which will tell you take a right here after 300 yards, right? So they're able to navigate with the help of Google. But the elephants don't have anything to navigate with. They have only their memory. And suddenly in their path, if you build houses, they'll obviously destroy them simply because that is the path that they need to take to get to the watering holes. So, this whole idea of research, especially social science research, is all human centric. It's all around the human being, as if, like the sophists in the Greek period and the Renaissance men, they believed that it was the world was neither heliocentric nor geocentric, but it was human centric. So, an attitude that has been perpetuated down the years for a very long time now. And what is the attitude? The attitude is everything that is there in nature is ours for the taking. If we come into conflict with some other species, then what do? We eliminate that. We eliminate that species. Okay? Today, dogs cannot live without human beings, even the feral ones. But we say kill them if they become an inconvenience. Now just imagine the opposite. Just imagine. These dogs say, what are these horrible fellows, human beings? Let's kill them. If they do that, Is that acceptable? It's not acceptable. The fact that elephants are doing something like that when they are absolutely going in the direction of uh, when they're going in the direction of their watering holes, and they find all kinds of new structures there which obstruct, they are very, very reasonably angry and they destroy that place. You can't blame an elephant. It's like saying that I'll go stand where there is a landmine, I'll step on the landmine and I'll get blown to pieces. It's like that. If you get into the way of an elephant's path, the elephant's survival depends on that path. So, this whole thing called animal human conflict is also looked at from the point of view of the human being, not from the point of view of the animal. So, social science research is always about placing the human being in the center of the world. And why do we need to have a science? We need to have a science because science is irrefutable. Let's go back once to the example of the resolutive compositive method. The resolutive compositive method of breaking things down and reassembling them doesn't consist of any living entity there. So it's a mechanical device which you have dismantled. Unless you are a believer in what Buddhism, Hinduism, and Jainism say, the universe is also, as far as the Westerners are concerned, the universe is also a mechanism. It runs to a mechanical regularity. Now, how it runs to that mechanical regularity, people don't know. I have talked about dark matter to you in the past while talking about Einstein, right? And the planets don't really have enough gravitational force to remain where they are, so they should be drifting away. Or if they have too much gravitational force, they should be coming towards each other. And if the sun has all the gravitational force that we imagine the sun to be having, then all the planets should go and collapse back into the sun. Doesn't happen. So people looked at the telescopes. The sky didn't look blue, it looked black. So they said it's dark matter. And somehow this dark matter is holding all the planets in their place. But if you belong to any of the three schools that I have talked about, Sanatana Dharma, which I said Hinduism, actually Hinduism is not a correct word. Sanatana Dharma, Jainism, and Buddhism. All of them talk about the universe as a living system. The sun is alive. The planets are alive. The stars are alive. And it's a very funny thing, despite the fact that it is the Westerners who said stars die and form black holes. They still don't take the astral objects as living and capable of dying. They are still mechanical. But look at the usage of the language. They are basically arguing that this particular language, okay, this particular language which they are uh, using is only as a metaphor. A dying star is not a literally dying star. It's just a metaphor of a star that is dying, which is untrue, which is untrue. So, the whole Western way of looking at life prioritizes the human being. It makes us believe that this world is entirely for our sake. Okay? And if you ask the Americans, they'll ask you, I mean, if you listen to the Americans, they will ask you, are we alone in this universe? If you're Shankaracharya, you'll poo-poo that and say, what do you mean, are you alone in the universe? Everything around you is living. What do you mean, are you alone? Why are you trying to draw these grotesque pictures, deformed human beings, all these things? They'll poo-poo that because it is worth being poo-poo. So, this excessive emphasis upon human being, upon human society, has actually proved to be counterproductive. People thought this kind of emphasis, laying of science down on society and trying to break the mysteries of human society, will produce fantastic results, has been something that has not, it has been something that has not seen the results that it wanted to see. Now, why do we need to have social science? The word social science is more of a 19th century creation. And it is because of one particular uh, one particular school of thought called positivism, led by Auguste Comte. Comte was constantly irritated by the fact that he thought there was certainty in understanding of the natural world around us. But there was no certainty of any kind, no certainty of any kind which was basically there in the understanding of human society. Now, one very big point that Comte has missed here is that this human society is not insular. It's not insular. It does not comprise only of human beings. It also requires you to interact with other species. It also requires you to interact with other forms of life. For years, people thought trees didn't live, but trees live. They have a life of their own. They may be immobile. They are not mobile, but that doesn't mean that they are not alive. Trees are very much alive. Okay. And yet, despite seeing all these things, we want to look at human society as a separate entity if you are a positivist. Something distinct from everything else. So much so that all you need to do is look inward. Look inward. If I have to understand myself, I have to open my mouth and look inside. Is it possible? It isn't. So, positivism and its notion of a social science were flawed right from the beginning. And as positivist thought progressed, it only created binaries. Binaries are opposite categories, okay? And a lot of Western thinking is based in the binary system. All right. So it created a lot of binaries for which there are no answers. So, what are those binaries? How will we understand them? Is something we'll have to pick up and understand in the form of fact value dichotomy. Ultimately, what determines a non science from a science, or strictly speaking, I don't think August Comte would mind if you say science and nonsense, not non-science. You won't mind that thing. Okay, so for him, facts generate, they basically generate knowledge which is certain, indisputable. Whereas values are those which are based in the individual mind. And these can come in the way of other values that other people hold, and you can have a conflict of values. And when you have a conflict of values, that is the beginning of the lack of a science and the beginning of a chaos. Okay? That is what August Comte will tell you in his positivism. Along similar lines, we have the birth of empiricism. Empiricism is German, whereas positivism is a French movement. In empiricism, what we find is that there is a perception. The perception is that the world is outside of us, not inside of us, but outside of us. And if we need to understand the world, then we have to understand these things, objects that are outside of us. We have to understand our behavior vis-a-vis those objects that we are seeing, not necessarily life forms. Empiricism concentrates upon objects, and because of its concentration on the term object, we have the birth of objective knowledge. Objective knowledge as being the true knowledge. Okay? So tomorrow, my back is gone for today, so you'll have to forgive me. Tomorrow, when we meet, we will pick up objectivity. We shall pick up the idea of fact and its face-off with value, and how this is supposed to produce scientific knowledge about the human society, not about anything and everything, but specifically the human society. So, thank you very much for being here. Now, tomorrow we shall do a little bit of regress in the sense of we'll go back a little to the idea of if you're saying that the human being is one of the many different things out there, then you're making an argument which says that we are making an argument that basically says that the human being is somehow special. Okay, so I'll stop here today. Tomorrow we shall look at how there have been two conceptions of the mind, and we will talk about how John Locke and his essay concerning human understanding perhaps change the way we think and act, and how this particular form of reasoning of John Locke's has been seminal in the way in which the world has emerged in whatever form it has. So thank you very much. So see you tomorrow at 6:30.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. I think you'll have nightmares now that you've heard my lecture. So happy nightmares to you.
No.
Don't say that, Professor.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Good night. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Bye.